Why is Leonard Burns the definition of aura farming? I mean, he literally farms aura with his ability, basically, but let's be real. The man is barely a part of the plot, and his big attack is standing with his arms crossed. On top of that, he's actually a part of the system that Shinra is trying to break, so he really shouldn't be such a cool character. And yet, with just the bare minimum of dialogue, Leonard Burns is one of the biggest aura farmers in the entire series. He could say nothing but still stand there and dominate the entire scene. Part of it is because he's always hyped up as the strongest character, but another part of it is something that set Burns apart from every other character in this series. That's why I want to take a look at Leonard Burns and his best scenes, discuss the 3 things that make him unlike the other characters, and explain why he always has unmatched aura. Just be warned that there might be some spoilers at the end of the video. So first I want to talk about his design, because Burns is far from an NPC. If anything, Burns is one of those guys that if you saw him across the street, you'd feel like an NPC in his story. First of all, he's got his hair pulled back, which, let's face it, almost no man can pull off. And I think part of the reason he pulls it off is because of how yoked this guy is. I mean, Burns is one of those guys that the first time you look at him, you're like, that's a big man.
I don't know what the hell you feeding him, but he is too damn big!
And at 50 years old, that's no joke. He's got massive shoulders, a massive chest, massive arms. Speaking of which, the guy always has his sleeves pulled up, which, you know, is the ultimate sign that he is a badass.
Safety always off.
Finally, he's got an eye patch. The eye patch is a tricky one because you either look like a dude who's seen some stuff after 2 tours in Nam, or you look like the kind of weeb that thinks regular showers are for casuals. Thankfully, Burns pulls it off, and it only adds to his badass energy. So just by looking at the dude, you can tell he's an old school boss who's seen a thing or two, which is pretty much Burns in a nutshell. As an older captain, Burns has seen more than most soldiers. And of course, in that time, he's earned the reputation as one of the strongest members of the Fire Force. And that's made pretty clear right away. The first time we meet Burns is at the rookie games. Shinra walks up to him and he's standing around with his arms crossed like usual. We don't know much about him yet, and he doesn't share that much with Shinra, but because of his design and the way he carries himself, we can tell he's a tough dude. And we do get a hint of this when he saves Tamaki by flying in the air. We get another hint of this when Shinra and Arthur team up against him in the Company 1 arc. It's a short clash, but it's one of the best examples of why Burns has unmatched aura. Actually, real quick before I get into that, make sure to become a channel member if you're enjoying the video. You get custom emojis and badges that you can show off in our weekly live streams, and you can even pick which series I cover next. Now, to start off the fight, Arthur charges in with his plasma sword. In response, Burns takes a simple stance and forces Arthur to immediately change his game plan. Actually, it's not even a stance. This dude barely moves his arm. He just slightly moves it, and that's enough to make Arthur shook. Mind you, Arthur is one of the most unfazed characters in the whole story. So then Burns takes the plasma sword to the arm, grabs the sword, and puts it out without breaking a sweat. Then he takes a point-blank attack to the chest from Shinra, basically a mini nuke to the chest. And this dude just stands there like, oh no, you ruined my shirt. Then with a single step, not a stomp, but a step, sends Shinra flying away on his ass. This dude has so much aura that he can just stand in one spot and win fights. It's like when you hand your older brother the controller in COD and he racks up like 5 kill streaks in 5 seconds without moving. In fact, Burns' whole shtick is literally standing in the same spot and farming aura. His ability Voltage Nova works as a thermal engine. The more thermal energy he generates, the more durable and stronger he becomes. And with each level of energy, he gets hotter and hotter to the point where you can't even stand near him without getting burned. Point being, the man practically invented aura farming because this is exactly how he fights people. And we get a better idea of this when he fights Shinra after the raid on the Nether. It's explained that Burns increases his strength and durability by feeding his internal flame. In other words, he becomes the embodiment of fire. And in the same vein, he becomes the embodiment of aura. By simply flexing or moving his hand, he can send shockwaves that send Shinra flying away. The dude has so much aura that he sets himself on fire and creates a force field of energy that can barely be penetrated even when Shinra charges at full power. And we see the full extent of this power when Shinra teams up against Burns again in season 3. Now at this point I'm going to get into spoiler territory, so if you don't want any spoilers at all, then this might be a good point to save the video for later. But the next fight goes pretty much exactly how you would imagine. A lot of Shinra kicking and a lot of Burns just standing there. But this time Burns reaches stage 5 of Voltage Nova. At stage 5 he becomes a massive fire lion that can melt flesh with just his hands. I mean, at this point the dude has so much aura that it's basically his whole weapon. Like, he literally beats you with aura, which is why Burns is one of, if not the biggest aura farmers in Fire Force. And yet that doesn't quite make sense, mainly because Burns really doesn't do or say all that much. Like, yeah, there's characters like Piccolo that are the cool silent type, but Piccolo is a big part of the team. You also have Jingwu as another strong silent type, but he's also the main character. Burns is a fairly important character, but like we talked about before, most of his contributions can be broken down to standing around with his arms crossed. And even when he does talk, he's very stoic and secretive, so he really doesn't say that much. Plus, he's kind of a bad guy for a while. He hides the truth of Shinra's past, and then in season 3, he joins the Whiteclads. So it shouldn't be this easy to root for a character that doesn't actually do or say that much, and often works against our main character. And yet, that's kind of the reason Burns is so cool. Part of the reason Burns stands out right away is because on top of the fact that he's an absolute mountain of a man, he's clearly a lot older than everyone else. All of the characters are in their teens and 20s, but Burns is 50. He's lived twice as long as most of the other characters. So he's an old head. He's a guy that's been around and has a lot of experience, and you can kind of tell just by looking at him. So while Burns literally has aura because of his powers, another part of his aura is his older style, his overall veteran vibe. We talked about his design before, but something I didn't point out is how he's always in a shirt and dress pants. Everyone else is either in a jumpsuit, robes, or military outfits. Burns is practically the head of the church, and he still rocks the GQ look. It goes back to this idea that you can tell he's an older and more mature character just by looking at him. He's a confident and composed character, not just because he's strong, but also because he's older and more experienced. And what separates him from other characters the most is how Burns' age affects his perspective. On the one hand, characters respect him because he's the elder. On the other hand, Burns sees himself as a veteran, more specifically a symbol of the previous generation rather than the current generation. Naturally, he perceives his role in the Fire Force as a pillar, both as a foundation of the Fire Force and an obstacle to be overcome. In season 3, we learn that Burns was given the name Leonard to be the Lion of the Empire. He prayed and prayed more than everyone else. When you pray that much, you're naturally going to stand out from everyone else. And he does this even as a kid, which explains why Burns always feels like such an intense character. Because he's always praying, he's always focused on his mission. And his mission, as we learn, is to be the Lion of the Empire and protect the Empire. And this is why he goes to such extreme lengths to stop Shinra, even before he joined the Whiteclads. Burns views himself as a symbol of the past. He devotes himself to protecting the empire that he is a part of. So when faced with the next generation, he views it as his mission to be an obstacle for them. This is why he hides the truth from Shinra until he gets stronger, and this is why he joins the Whiteclads. Burns honestly believes that it's his mission to exhaust everything he has to protect the current empire. But the reason behind that is because he is a part of the past, and the current generation can only build something new once they finally surpassed him. And this is exactly what we see when he openly takes all of Shinra's attacks. Burns' personal mission is to raise Shinra in the next generation so that they can overcome the status quo and build something new. And this is why he fights so hard to be a constant obstacle. Naturally, this is why Burns has unmatched aura. His religious dedication to prayer makes him a naturally very intense character. He's always thinking about his relationship with God and the church. But more importantly, he's an intense character because he defines himself as an obstacle to be overcome. As a result, he manifests this energy where he is constantly perceived as a massive obstacle, hence why he has so much aura simply by standing and crossing his arms. And like we mentioned before, his ability makes it so that he literally fights people with aura. All of his fights consist of standing and taking hits and blowing the enemy away with catastrophic thermal energy. So because he's a human nuke, and because he's an intense character that devotes himself to opposing everyone that would challenge him, Leonard Burns is the definition of aura farming. But what do you think? How would you describe Burns? Who is the biggest aura farmer in Fire Force? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to become a channel member. You get custom perks and emojis to show off in our weekly live streams. You can pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also check out my other Fire Force videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.